Hello everyone and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I am your host Nick Henning, and today we are watching the Lost Ruins of Arnak Grand Semifinal. What that means is that all four of these players got to this event not by winning Lost Ruins of Arnak, but by winning something else. Andy here in first seat, by the way, we're playing at 200% speed. Andy here in first seat buys Dog right off the bat, which I think is a really good choice. First seat's a little bit tough. This might come back to haunt him a little bit in 4-player later, but looking at that opening flop there's some decent cards out there, but Dog is head and shoulders above the rest, so I really like the purchase there. Andrew here gets Trowel, which I think personally is a little bit of a mistake. I would probably head and grab that first arrowhead there. I don't think the trowel is so important that grabbing it early really matters. And in the same situation, I think the same about Brian, though I think it is pretty respectable for seat 3 to grab the rough map there, as it makes that explore a level 2 site on turn 2 from seat 3 an even more viable option. Henry here's in a funny position. Usually as seat 4 you don't get first crack at the camps, and so we could see him really kind of mulling this over. I know that he was practicing this game the night before and making some plans. I think right here again the plan is just send your first guy to Arrowhead site. That is just kind of the way that you primarily are going to open this. Put some pressure. There aren't any crazy assistants out, but there are definitely some decent ones. And also showing the Exile assistant in play means that there's a chance that the assistants are going to get clogged up at a certain point. So there's a marginal better advantage for getting them earlier, and it's just always nice to get them at the end of round 1 anyway. By the way, you can see this footage and coverage on the WSBG official website with Chris George and JC Tao, who is an incredible Arnak player. They played at normal speed and did some really great in-depth commentary. So my plan is to basically just run this as fast and chaotically as possible as an alternative for folks that would rather watch this in about, let's say 80 minutes or so rather than the 2.5 hours of this game. So feel free to check both of those out if you want to see some extra insights from JC along the way there. Henry here decides that he's going to go ahead and explore, which is just kind of an easy privilege that you have from seat 4. And I do think that exploring as his second option would have been completely viable here. He flips a pretty good site. You want something that gives you either gems and everything like that. He's going to crap up his deck, though, compared to all the other players who have made a purchase on the first turn. He's going to have a whole bunch of junk there. And he flips a monster that he's unlikely to defeat on the first turn, which is, I think, kind of expected when you do an early explore. Andy here doesn't get punished for the early dog and immediately just slots into what most of the time first seat is generally doing anyway, followed by Andrew coming in and grabbing the gem, which is oftentimes the second seat play anyway. So kind of funny how that worked out, and I think that the players later in the order maybe didn't take advantage. I do like Brian's purchase of the gold pan here. That is definitely a solid pickup for a buck. Flipping the watch immediately afterwards is pretty funny. But the other thing that's nice about the gold pan is that it lets you explore that level 2 site because it's got those 2 icons on it. So he, I think, is really angling towards a turn 2 explore in the top row, which is a really, really nice place to be in seat 3. We've got a gem advance on the track for Henry here, which is okay, but I think that he needs to be a little bit more concerned about what his second worker is going to be doing. I think that I would probably send someone out to the camp before advancing on the track. There's no terrible reason for him to super rush the track at this stage, although now he's going to be able to do it with that idol there, make sure that he's first up top, but none of his opponents are pressuring him, so I think he's being a little bit too pushy on that. Andrew here does hit the extra 2 compasses and starting hand to go flip off the top, and unfortunately for him, he hits Crash Site, which is one of the, I don't think it's one of the worst ones that you can flip at the beginning. I think the tablet ones, like tablet card coin, are very worse at the beginning because at least you can get an item that you're going to use, and Theodolite is the right pickup here for sure. I do really like that in this instance here. If Andrew finds a way to defeat this monster, that'd be great, but actually he has a gem, not an arrowhead, so that's going to put him really far behind, and that's always the danger of exploring on turn 1 is when you hit something you just really can't deal with at all, it can really, really hurt. Brian's going to scoop up a bunch of compasses here, which is either going to let him explore now or just kind of set up for a play next turn. Really quickly, we see the easy spots on all the sites kind of closing up. And again, I really think that Henry maybe should have pressed the time. He has no rush on the track right now. That being said, him advancing on the track, I do think that he makes the right choice with the assistant here. Whew. All right, Andrew goes ahead and he takes the one arrowhead that he got from earlier, moves up a little bit into the nice left spot, which gives you more options. So I like that. Looks like we have an advance from Andrew, who's quickly running out of actions here, I think, although that's going to give him a coin back and some options of things to purchase. By the way, we flipped out Lantern, which is a pretty good item, and I think most of our players are low on cash, except for Henry and Andy, who went to that coin website. The coin site at the beginning. So Andy might get himself a lantern in addition to the dog, which is going to be a pretty insane start if he's able to do that. I'm not quite sure what's in Henry's hand, and we see him getting boxed out here by Brian, who's fine to play a very slow starting game. His first turn is going to be pretty bad, so he's going to make up with it with a really good second turn, which is definitely possible for him. Yeah, Henry here, I think, was a bit too focused on moving up the track there. He now has to pay 2 cards probably in order to go to any tent site, and he already has used, I believe, 2 cards to explore. Yeah, because he started with 2 compasses, and so if he has, he has to have a fear in his hand. If he has 2 fear in his hand, I think this choice is a little bit easier. And he goes ahead and advances on the track here. Where did he get that? Oh, he got the tablet from his Explorer. Oh, he went to a site with a tablet. That's very clever on his part. I do think that's a really good pickup, and he's getting a lot of value for it. However, he's just really kind of missing a lot of his tempo on the first turn. Sorry that I'm coming at you, Henry. I think you're a really good player, but just a couple things that I'm noticing in the sequencing here. Obviously, a really weird start to the beginning. Andrew here does manage to advance up the track thanks to his Explorer, so it's not a total bummer that he missed, because of course using that idle allows him to do that. By the way, I do want to point out that Andrew made a very clever choice of advancing on the left side of the track to explore before advancing on the right side with his gem to give himself some more options with that magnifying glass next turn. I think it's a great choice, and he picks up the right assistant here. Tablets just become really important in the middle of the game here. Henry goes ahead and scoops up an arrowhead. That's a curious choice because he makes arrowheads, so he's going to be a little bit arrowhead heavy. I think he probably should have picked up the tablets instead to support his jeweler, that assistant that turns money into arrowheads along the way here. I missed what Andy did, but I think that might have actually been a pass on his part. I think he might just be done for the turn, and I think that's probably the same for Andrew. Brian here has a ton of compasses, and he uses them to pick up the ocarina here. Really weird first turn sequence here where he's essentially pulling back. There's no other people in play, so he's going to be able to go and pick up 2 compasses here. So functionally, Brian has paid 4 compasses. Okay, I see. And he pays a coin. So he pays 2 compasses because he gets 2 compasses back. He pays 2 compasses and a coin for the privilege of having the ocarina in his deck. It's not a wild choice. It's a good card. It's worth 2 victory points. He'll be able to run it on future turns and do a lot of cool and powerful things with it. He has tablets, so he knows he can run it as soon as next turn if he has it. I think I personally would have just gone a little bit slower and let that thing go to the wayside and figure out something to do with my compasses later. But he's going to be okay on compasses due to the rough map. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to pan out for him. Yeah, I think I would have saved those resources. It just doesn't pack enough punch at this stage for me to want to spend those along the way. I'm getting a little bit of audio from the players as they start chit-chatting between the rounds that I'm turning off because they sound like chipmunks when they're going this fast. The row at this stage is not the most exciting. Sacred Drum is probably not going to be something that you play, although War Mask can be something if you do some aggressive explores and you stumble into something you don't want to deal with and you need that arrowhead for advancing. Can actually do some cool stuff in the early part of the game. It's just a value spot, but I think it's unlikely anyone's going to end up taking that at all. Andrew here presses the fact that he's in first seat now and he can get that gem out and play. It's going to cost him a compass to get that gem and advance on the track there. So I kind of wonder if he should have, instead of going to that site, if he should have gone to the site on board using a car to get the fear there and getting that compass and gem along the way. I think that probably would have been a superior line for him. And so... yeah, I mean, I think that the idea there is that he's got the fear. he'll still have a fear left in hand and he could go to a 10 site later and just acknowledge that he's not exploring this turn. I think that would be entirely fine because he's got the tablets. And so if he goes to that top left side with the gem and then goes to the right side with the arrowhead, I think he would have been in perfectly fine shape, and that would have been my focus as him. Looks like maybe I missed Brian's turn because now we've got the card row up top here. My guess is that he is debating his turn or has already used rough map is the most likely guess here. But if he's planning out his turn, it might be thinking about where he wants his second worker to go. That being said, I think if he's going up top, he needs to do that first. I'm also realizing that there's, I think, a small outside chance because of the line that Brian took that he wouldn't have enough compasses to head up top, even with the rough map, because I think he had 2 at the end of last turn, and that puts him up to 5 in total. So if he draws none of his compasses, they're at the bottom of his deck. So you can really end up, obviously you need to take some gambles in this game, but he could really end up shooting himself in the foot in that way. Henry's really debating his choices here. I think that for him, grabbing that gem seems completely legit to me. It's going to really crap up his deck with tons and tons of fear, but it's not a bad choice for him to do that. The second choice I was going to say is grabbing those tablets there. As we mentioned last turn, those tablets are going to be very important for him. Andy here cracking off dog early while he still can to get himself some compasses, which is going to let him explore. I like that choice a lot. So far, Andy, I think, is making the tightest choices of all the folks at the table, which makes sense. I played him last year, actually, in Lost Ruins of Arnak. I want to say it was the semifinals or the round before. And he said this isn't necessarily a strength of his, but clearly he does actually absolutely know what he's doing here. Andrew clearly has essentially only solid resources in hand. I'm also realizing that Andrew actually has Trowel in hand, and so the rush to get those gems, maybe even less value. Maybe he should have used Trowel to get his gems because he's going to be left with an extra gem at the end of the turn that he's not going to be able to use for a while. He's really going to get stopped up in the middle of the track here. We're going to see Brian cash in and finally do that big top explore that we've all been talking about. A pretty normal flip here. This is not the most exciting option for him, but it's not the worst. Well, maybe it is the worst one right now. I guess in his situation, double tablet gem would have probably been the worst. The 2 compasses doesn't do anything for him now, but is always just a really good repair. The fact that the monster there requires an airplane is a little bit ugly for him. If he managed to draw into the ocarina, then he can either bounce back or use the ocarina to defeat that, which I think is going to help out quite a lot. So I'd be curious to see if he drew that card and if it came back to pay dividends. If not, that's really quite unfortunate for him. And he's going to use his compasses to go out and explore. Henry, by the way, we missed his turn, but it looked like he went and got himself an arrowhead, which I don't love. He makes arrowheads, right? Like he's got a jeweler that does that. Why does he need an extra arrowhead? I think he either needed to get a gem or he could have just been a little bit slower this turn and grabbed some compasses. Did he use 2 cards for it too? Yeah, it looks like he had a lot of fear cards, which makes sense. His deck is probably full of just piles of fear cards right now. Great. Andy explores, finds himself. We're gonna have a lot of fear cards this game. Finds himself a fear tablet gem. Hopefully for him, he's got a couple fear in hand so that he can consider addressing that monster this turn. But he might end up taking it on the chin here. Andrew finally advances here, knowing that he's getting a little bit pressured on that gem side now that people have some idols available to them, and removes his fear, which I think makes a ton of sense. Brian here moves up to the left side, giving himself some flexibility, but he has to use an idol to do so. He's not in a huge rush, but being able to grab an available assistant is interesting. And whether people are going to wait for the assistant or press for the assistant is a really good question here. I'm noticing that actually Henry is sitting on a gem that I missed from somewhere. Oh, interesting. Okay, I see. Henry used the whip to travel because he didn't like his options in play. I think that's an okay choice. War Mask isn't that exciting for whip, so putting it back into the deck is pretty legit. Theodolite here will get some good value for Andrew, which is a nice pickup for him. And he's kind of slow rolling at this stage. He says, I don't really want any of these assistants that are in play. Andy took the last good assistant. I don't personally mind the discounter as much as other people do, but those three are generally considered to be the worst three. And so the player's slow rolling here does make a lot of sense. Brian here, unfortunately, with a no fear hand draw, I guess, which is a little bit unlucky on his part that he has to use that to go to the tent site there. And yeah, people really, really scared about picking up that fear in play. I don't love picking up fear early, but I think if it's between that and using just a normal travel card, I would be traveling to that location personally. We're going to see next turn, given how few fear have been played this turn, that I think there's going to be a lot of fear in players' hands. And so we're going to see a fair amount of contention for sites where fear can be used. Either by defeating monsters, a couple in play care about that fear. And looks like we see a flip of the Prospector. Henry had picked up the Exiler, and then Brian, I don't quite see what assistant he picked up along the way, but I'm sure we'll figure it out soon. I think, again, in case it wasn't clear, that I think that if I were in Henry's position, I would have picked up the Discounter rather than the Exiler. But knowing that he has lots and lots of fear in his deck, he's going to be able to use that Exiler forever. And the Exiler is a lot more powerful in a game where we have the flips that we've had so far in this game. He's always going to be able to take an action that puts a fear in his discard pile. And that Exiler actually functionally will act as an extra compass or an extra tablet because he's grabbing those location sites on the left there, which I think is going to work out just fine for him. Andrew, therefore, gets to reap the benefit of kind of being last in to scoop up the Prospector, and sometimes that's just how it goes, unfortunately, for the other players there. So a lot of interesting stuff that he could choose to buy from the Prospector's perspective here. Brian's going to do a watch pass here, and of course, he's not all that unlucky because he purchased 3 items last turn. That makes sense. In fact, it was lucky for him that he did draw into the compasses that he ultimately would have needed. He was not able to leave that monster behind, though. So the Ocarina not coming and paying dividends until, I guess, maybe next turn will come into play. Andy here is going to miss out on a second assistant, it looks like, but defeat the monster, which I think is a choice that I agree with. Not picking up a fear is worth kind of missing that round. He's not winning the race on the track anyway, and so just slow and steady scooping up some monsters is going to be the line for him. Andrew's got a lot of money here. He could go for like high points purchases by doing like fishing rod or grappling hook. He could go for make my deck super skinny and draw all my good stuff with donkey, and he chooses kind of the mid option, which is the ostrich, which draws a card instead of 2 cards like the donkey, and a travel, which I think is an okay choice. If I had 5 coins, I'd entertain it a little bit more. Otherwise, I think I would have leaned towards taking donkey, which Andy manages to scoop up in his already very, very good deck. Looks like we're going to see a pass from Andrew here. Brian's already passed for the... Oh, is Brian... Oh, yeah, of course he's passed for the turn because he picked up a bunch of coins. And we are cutting into the next round. Seeing fishing rod go is always something that's a little bit sad. 2 coins, 2 points for Andrew there. Brian, I'm noticing, has just a lot of resources in play, but wasn't able to sort of like capitalize on his turn 2 play. So I think he's quite behind at this stage, actually. Like he has a lot of just like tablets that are going unused right now because he wasn't able to advance enough on the track to get like a gem or an arrowhead. And so I think maybe having hit up one of those tent sites, or actually probably going and taking that fear and gem last turn would have been the line that I would have gone for with him now that I'm looking back at it. He will, however, head back up top now to get the goods that are due to him, and we know that he'll have a ocarina to either defeat that monster or to bounce back and do some fun shenanigans along the way, and he has fear cards to take advantage of. Henry draws back into the whip and is perfectly content to take the stone key, which I think is probably the best item in the game for its just raw points value, which is more exciting later than early, but it's still quite good early and quite flexible early. And an interesting question on Henry's part is whether he should have spent the 3 compasses rather than the whip, but there's nothing else in play that super demands having the whip still available to him, so just a question of how lucky he feels like playing. Dog here is going to snatch up, it looks like a couple of tablets, which sounds about right because this is the part of the game where tablets get really, really choked out. And I think that's looking at Andrew here, he's going to want to start putting pressure on the middle of the track. So he really needs to get himself a arrowhead. Speak of the devil, he will scoop exactly that up because he's going to be able to get himself some tablets by moving up the middle here. And I think if Andrew can get himself even more tablets and go straight up the middle, he might just leave his book behind and just start kind of like rushing that extra card draw there is going to be really good. It's the best reward on the track most of the time, in my opinion. Brian here has just like an absolute boatload of compasses, which probably he should be using to explore, but he has all these fear cards in hand, although he'll be able to upgrade those fear cards thanks to the ocarina. So he needs to figure out how exactly he's going to various places. And he's going to go ahead and grab, he's not going to explore those compasses. He'll use them for something else this turn, which is fine. There's enough artifacts in play that he can make something happen with it. Crap up his deck a little bit, which is okay because if he draws that fear with ocarinas, they're not quite so bad. Henry will scoop up some compasses here. I guess he's angling for a level 2 explore, which I don't think he would need to do. I think I would explore in his position and then figure out what to do with my tent worker afterwards. Andy here just slow rolling with this stuff and draws himself 2 cards. I think this is going to be an Ostrich Explorer for Andrew. And probably, yeah, he's got plenty of coins with the Prospector. So he'll remove a fear from his deck, which is normally not that exciting in the mid game, but I think actually here is nice because with the Prospector, you're going to have a little bit more cards that are a little bit more valuable in your deck. And Andrew will draw into the perfect stuff that kills exactly this guy. And hopefully for him, we'll have an extra fear in hand as a discard fodder for that. Brian here just advances on the track, it looks like. Wait, is that what happened? What did he do? I don't know. I missed what Brian did. Or maybe they're realizing that we moved the wrong piece. Okay, that makes a whole lot more sense. It's like, didn't quite see why he had a compass there. Henry heading up top. This is a really good flip for him. He needs he probably needs as many tablets as he can possibly get. A gem is not terrible for him here because his glass is broken up onto the upper side. He's got lots and lots of flexibility now that he's got 3 idols available to him. He really should be able to run the track, maybe even get 2 bonuses on that 4th row there. And he should get on those pretty much immediately. I'm a little worried about his coin situation. I'm not sure he's going to be able to defeat this monster either. And the people at this table are really, really valuing the 6 Explorer here, which I think they're going a little bit hard on because they don't need to. Like, having 3 level 2 sites up top isn't actually helpful to Andy at this point. There's going to be 2 level 2 sites up top. And Andy drew a lot of extra cards to deal with those ants, so that's probably a really, really goated flip for him. But if he just explores a middle site instead, and Crash Site's already gone, which is kind of the worst thing you can flip. So in the mid-game, really anything you can flip off the deck is going to be, tablets or arrowheads, which works out just fine. And then you can use your other compasses for some flexibility on the artifacts. So I personally would have done a middle explore in Andy's position, but we will see how this pans out for him here. Andrew here is going to kick the Theodolite. I guess he's already got, he does already have 2 guys in play, which makes sense. Just get a bunch of value, give himself some options of things to purchase. Doesn't seem like he's in a terribly huge hurry to buy anything. I think that if I'm in his shoes, I am probably looking to pick up the Parrot, that 2 coins for 2. Even if it's just kind of like a mediocre travel card going forward, I still want to be making those purchases when I'm in the Prospector seat most of the time. Brian here is trying to make sure that he slow rolls everyone else's workers, and Andy still has 2 workers available because he's done the dog and donkey lead here. So he's trying to spend his resources, hoping that Andy will place out his worker in advance. If Andy's able to slow roll for him, it's going to be really, really annoying, which is great in the long run. Henry here cracks for the extra card draw, which I think is a great choice. It's going to jam up Andrew's choices a little bit in terms of using that gem, and also Brian's choices in terms of using that gem. So I really like that move. Timing wise from him, and then he can kind of come up behind with his book and maybe get even a second one, depending on how this looks. It depends on if he have coins in his hand. The coins thing is really gonna slow him down a little bit, I think. We get a pickup of War Mask here from Andrew, which is gonna give him the option about whether he wants to defeat this Scorpion or not. He's not pressured on the track, so I think it's fine for him to go a little bit slower there. I think I personally would have waited a little bit longer. He doesn't need all of these tablets. Oh, I guess use the arrowheads, go up the right side. Well, no, he wants to go up the right side, left side. If he goes up the left side, he can still move his book. Yeah, I don't think he needed War Mask. I think I would have waited a little bit on it. Although I think he's maybe considering not defeating the Scorpion this turn, but it is a lot of points, and it's not like he's crushing on the tracks. I'll be curious to see how he plays out the rest of the turn. I think the War Mask is an okay pickup, but not a godly one. Brian is rich here. Again, Andy, we see, did not actually put his worker out into play, which is making Brian's, ooh, do I recall my guy from the top row, a very frustrating process. He also knows that he needs an arrowhead if he's going to defeat this guy or come back and fight this guy or whatever it is that he's going to do. It's worth noting that Andy might not even go for this site up top here because I think he has a gem in hand, or maybe he used it to advance on the track. But, coming back and getting two compasses and a gem is not great in the position where Andy is on the track here. So Brian bounces back. He's going to have to find a way to probably get an arrowhead. My guess is he's going to explore, given that he's got all those compasses, and figure it out from there. Henry cashes in all of his guys. I think at this stage we're going to see him use an idol to advance his book up the track. This is where we see it be a little bit awkward that the Exiler has no fear support in his hand, is my guess. It looks like he's out of cards. He's got a card on the table there. So if the Exiler has something to exile, yeah, maybe it's worthwhile. If he can try to defeat this frog that's up on his site, that's important too. But if he can advance to the bottom, it's important. We know that he doesn't have any money left because all of his money is in play. He can't really exile his money with the Exiler, so maybe moving up the book is actually not all that important. Maybe he just defeats the frog and ends the turn here. Wow, he puts all three idols up. That seems a bit excessive. Definitely over planning. It looks like he's going to... Wow, he's going to pick up 2 coins and 2 compasses. 3 coins and 3 compasses because he wants to buy the Pathfinder's staff. That is a very, very, very aggressive choice. He's going to scoop some resources here that I think are going to help him a little bit, but not a ton. I mean, I guess he needs the arrowhead. Now he can move his book up. He'll use the Exiler then after that. But I think he's still going to be stuck with this frog there and kind of like an errant gem. Or I guess he can use the gem to move up the top middle of the track. I generally don't use idols for coins and compasses. I think using it for at least one would have made sense. I think using it for all 3 seems a little aggressive to me. I think I would have used one for tablets, moved up, upgraded maybe the jeweler, and then you could use one for a coin compass, then use the jeweler again and end the turn there. We'd have to see what else is in his hand, but that's roughly what I'm thinking. Looks like he has 2 cards in hand. If one of those is a fear, I especially think that this line makes sense to me. Andy here advances on the track. He's going to pick up another assistant. He will pick up the assistant that has the airplane on it, which will either help him defeat a ants or just traveling or coins in the future. And Andy really nicely gets to flip into the runic blade, which is a great use of 2 compasses. I think it's one of the best artifacts you can bump into in this early stage of the game. Did Andrew just move the wrong thing? What happened there? Oh no, he is green. I keep thinking he's blue for some reason. So Andrew moves his magnifying glass up there. So I was saying some stuff about Andrew before, thinking that he was in the blue seat, but he's not. He's in the green seat. That's my mistake. Brian is going to be very aggressive. He's got the full Monty of compasses here, and says I'm going to go to the top. He knows what's been flipped so far, and he flips probably the best one that he possibly could at this stage, which is 2 tablets, 2 arrowheads. It's going to allow him to do a lot of moves on the track. He is, what seed are you? You're blue. He's blue. He definitely needs those resources in order to advance on the track. He also might even just be able to like defeat these monsters along the way. In fact, if he defeats that owl, he can then use the airplane from it to defeat the dragon. So I think defeating monsters is going to be kind of the ideal path for him here. That was a pretty good flip. He has an absolute pile of fear in his discard now. Henry here, what did he do? Something important, probably. Didn't. Oh, he advanced his magnifying glass and got rid of a fear there, just kind of pressing on the track there. I see that. That makes a lot of sense. And finally, Andy put out his last worker, and got himself some tablets. I said that there were going to be a lot of fear, behind this stage, but it looks like I was wrong about that. This is why I keep getting confused about what the colors are, because Brian keeps moving the wrong guys. Brian moves up the track here and scoops up a free tablet, which is a really nice get for being on that side there. I think that was a good choice on his part. Andrew, I think, moved up his... let me pause for a second, because what Andrew did on his last turn was advance his book up to flip over his guy there, which is fine, but I think the sequencing was a little cleaner if he moved up the left side. Or even the right side, maybe, picked up the tablet there, and then this turn advanced up. So I think Andrew might have missequenced his advancing there, and avoided getting some bonuses along the way. Henry advances and upgrades the jeweler, so he's going to be able to use that coin. Advancing the book there. Andy, dragging behind, moves up the track. Andrew does indeed defeat the scorpion despite not needing to, and draws for it immediately. Depending on what he has in hand, that may be a mistake. If he knows that he doesn't have any fear in his deck, that's fine. But if he's not looking to draw anything in particular, I sometimes like to slow roll that draw until the beginning of the next turn, unless I know that I'm going to draw into something usable, or if I'm like praying to flip into something pretty cool, which I don't think Andrew's necessarily doing here. I don't know if he has any other compasses, but if he, for instance, draws his trowel, it's going to really backfire on him, because it looks like he has no compasses available to him right now. Looks like Brian does have 3 tablets. I think that it is more important that he defeats those monsters than necessarily advances on the track. Oh, and he pushes up his main guy on the track there, because he knows that he's got these gems and nothing to do with them. I think that's actually a really nice choice on his part. I like that quite a lot. He's then going to be able to push up on the left side there, draw another card, and upgrade. That's going to give him some really cool options. I like that line a lot for him. Henry here does indeed have the car to defeat the frog, and the jeweler is not used to the max capacity, but being able to untap it and get that arrowhead there to do that is a good choice. So I do like that he found a line for defeating that while moving up the track there. Andy is behind on the track here, but I think he's still got a lot of gas in the tank this turn. I can't quite see his resources. This is the only board that's kind of off here. But yep, here's a couple freebies to defeat our ant here. Although one of them does cost him a coin. He doesn't really need coins at this point. He's got a solid deck as it is, and buying other stuff is really just gonna probably make it worse at this stage. Keeping a low density for him is almost certainly the correct call here. Andrew scooping up a tablet and a coin. And looks like he's going to advance his magnifying glass here to just get a little further on the track, which makes sense. No reason to dilly-dally about that. We're going to see that upgrade from Brian here. Just going to give him an extra arrowhead. He might be looking at using his book at the bottom. I mean, I think if he can possibly figure out a way to do both, that's really the ideal. That looks like Henry did have another fear card in hand that went unused. So the other line I was suggesting earlier about him moving his book, not being as aggressive with his idols, and untapping the Exiler would have been a viable play along the way. I'm not sure that it's better, but it would have been interesting to see. Usually when you're behind on the track, you're going to move in the way that Andy does here, which is kind of just, magnifying then book, magnifying then book. That's often the way that it goes on Bird Temple when you are behind. When you're ahead, you're a little bit more interested in running that magnifying glass and getting those bonuses. He untapped the guy that gives 2 coins rather than the compass end coin, which I think is an interesting choice. I'm not sure that I fully agree with that. Andrew picking up the parrot that we mentioned earlier, flipping Flask, which is a really, really nice pickup for probably Andy, who just got 2 coins from untapping the assistant that I was just maligning not even a moment ago. Brian here has to figure out his sequencing. So if he spends his tablet and arrowhead to move his book up, then he will have still an idol and a tablet left, which will defeat that owl. So I think that's the first thing I would do in his position, is I'd advance the book and pick up the discounter. He likes the draw discard guy though, which who knows what he drew, and he does have a lot of fear cards in his deck, so he'll be able to find a way to make use of it along the way there. Andy will immediately scoop up that that Flask, which is a great get, and then Andrew will luck into an airdrop, so a couple of really monster 2-coin flips in a row. Here's going to be the draw discard. Oh, watch is actually kind of interesting here. Does he have no other cards in hand? I mean, if it's the only card, it gets discarded, right? Maybe he has another card and thought he was just kind of cycling his deck or something. I'm not quite sure. If he's able to pass to the watch with 3 coins, it's really nice. You need coins in the latter half of this track, so it'll give him a lot of flexibility later. Yep, there's that other card, and we're going to see him discard the compass. Hurts a little bit, but certainly the right call here. And we're going to see the defeat of that owl there. Andy looks like he's getting a couple coins from the airplane pilot, so he didn't need them to buy that Flask before. So I do think that flipping the boat gentleman would have been my personal choice there. Looks like a couple extra resource pickups for Andrew, who passes the turn. We're going to see Brian here punch a dragon or befriend a dragon or a bat monster or whatever you want to describe that horrible thing as, and probably use it immediately. Bring us back to Andy, who might be kind of out of gas at this stage. I don't know that grappling hook really does a whole lot for him, but it is 2 coins for 2 points. He's got to decide if that's worthwhile for him or not. He counts his deck to see if it is. It's a little tough. Grappling hook is not a great item, but it does have a car on it. So if he's looking at his travel icons and seeing whether he does anything there, he says, no, I'm not interested. And then Brian passes using the watch to scoop up 3 coins. We clear the deck, leaving an expensive 4-coin machete and 4-coin tent in play. It's going to kind of lock that up. And we flip 2 very exciting cards, the Coconut Flask and the Pathfinder Sandals. With the pickup of the last assistant revealing the boot arrowhead guy, the Coconut Flask suddenly is very interesting, especially if you have a lot of fear cards in hand. It's a good way to make use of those fear cards, especially now that we're at the stage of the game where you really want to be traveling to those better sites up top if possible. Not to mention the Pathfinder Sandals, which are just a really, really amazing card anyway. You can kind of explore and run away. They give you a lot of flexibility. If you have a fear card, you could send them down to get a gem and discard a card. So a lot that can be done with those. Henry is going to quickly snatch up the 2 tablets, 2 arrowheads, which is a great, great get for him for sure. And that's the advantage that he gets of having everyone fully explore the top row here. In fact, all players are going to be able to go to the top row if they have the right cards to do so. Looks like Henry used his monster from last turn in addition to a coin. Coins are clearly, as he's shown, been a little bit hard for him to come by, so that's something that's a little bit tough. Andy here drawing cards, which makes sense. He's got Dog and Donkey in his deck, so he's going to be drawing as many as possible. Even in a vacuum, the site that he went to would be the one that I'd want to go to if you couldn't get the 2 tablets, 2 arrowheads. And even then, maybe the one he went to is better. A lot of coin payment here for Andrew to get up top, which is fine. He's the prospector. It kind of is just like a stealth traveling guy anyway. Brian here is going to be able to take the last site with a double boat, and the Explorer up top is really going to have paid out from him last turn, as he wouldn't have been able to go a 3rd site if he hadn't created all those sites here. Henry jams out the stone key, which I don't think he needed to do in this moment. I think probably deciding whether he was exploring or picking up the site that he wants in play would have been a little bit wiser in this moment. Flask is going to rip 3 cards as Andy's going to just basically draw into his whole deck this turn between Donkey and Flask and all that good stuff. Pretty thrilling stuff for him. I think, looking at the board, obviously Brian and Henry are ahead on the track, but Andy's deck is the most powerful, most cohesive. His monster defeats are good. Everyone's kind of similar situation in idols. I do kind of like Andy's position most. How many monster defeats are there? Yeah, it's close. It's not insane, but I think Andy's gonna have a really big turn here with those draws, and that's gonna maybe put a little bit of a gap here. Prospector has not really come to full bear here in terms of the power of cards that have gone into Andrew's deck. A couple good ones, but not enough to, I think, really impress, especially, he came a little bit later anyway. Brian's a little bit behind on assistant equity, though he has obviously lots and lots of idols, so some extra points there. He's going to explore and find himself even more gems, which is probably a little bit annoying for him. He really is in need. That was a bad explore. Like, there was really, that was the worst card in the deck for him to flip because he wanted tablets or arrowheads. So that was a pretty bad beating for him, I think. He looks kind of defeated by that in the moment, too. Henry, what did Henry do? Henry moved up the right side of the track here as he was being pressured, which I think makes a lot of sense to get that reward. And he's in no rush whatsoever. He's going to use the dog to get the resources that he wants. Did he just take coins? I think if I was in his position, I probably would have been taking tablets, but I, again, can't fully see his resources. But he has access to extra coins. I think buying machete or tent is not so important for him right now. We see Parrot here being used as disrespectfully as it can by exploring out to another site, which tells me that Andrew probably does not have a lot of fear cards in hand, or maybe any fear cards in hand, which makes sense. He's been playing a pretty tight deck building in terms of removing those fear cards from his deck. I think that would be pretty reasonable. And he has lots and lots of arrowheads, but really no way to get compasses right now, maybe. So I'd be curious to see if he can do anything about that tiger. He's probably going to advance on the track to deal with it. In fact, that is the answer. He does have the arrowheads to move his book up to the right side of the track there and grab that tablet. If he can do that before anybody else, that's going to be a really nice value that he should get. In fact, he may have wanted to do that even before exploring, but I guess he also does have some value in being curious and seeing what comes next. Making a plan from there. But it's just hard to say no to those tablets. Free tablets on the track are one of the best resources you can be getting along the way. Are we going to get an explorer here? No, that's a use of 3. I see. Brian runs away from the tanker that he's probably unable to defeat with his things, uses his 3 compasses to get out of the way there, and scoops up 2 tablets. I think that's a completely legit option on his part. He needs tablets or arrowheads. He doesn't need those gems. So his resources are definitely making his life a little bit difficult. That was definitely, I keep saying definitely, that is going to slow him down a bit. And maybe give someone else the opportunity to come in and defeat that tanker there for the 2 coins in that arrowhead. That's best for Andrew and Andy, who are the ones who are running around in coins right now. Henry's going to continue pressing the explore button in this case. I don't know that he needs to do this. He's got a couple of resources available to him. I think that he should have headed over, he's got his Exiler. He has a Fear in play, but he's going to upgrade his Exiler this turn. So I think he probably should have headed to one of those other 2 sites that makes a Fear along the way there, and then gets him a gem, which he can use to either advance kind of up the middle or his top thing. Like if he can get to the top this turn and be the 23 points, that's pretty great. If he upsides his Exiler. Yeah, I think I would have just grabbed one of those gems. Having the extra idol at this stage, not necessarily worthwhile. Andy here almost certainly has a Fear card in his hand because he's drawn about 9 gazillion. And so he's going to use that Coconut Flask exactly as we talked about before and convert it into an arrowhead. Really good value, good points for him as well. I think that's a lot better than going and doing an Explore this turn. For an idol that you're not necessarily convinced you want to use, it's going to cost you the 4 points. And very quickly, we've come to a stage where there are just very few monsters in play, and it's going to mean what the last turn looks like and who's going to be able to use their book for that free monster kill has suddenly become a very real problem. And this is the disadvantage of being 3rd and 4th seat, which is generally better at the beginning of the game, but really comes back to haunt you in the last round of the game here. Couple coins and an arrowhead use with an idol here. Brian will cap all the way out to get up to the top there. He is going to be the first at the top of the track. I guess I was talking about Henry doing that, and I should have realized that it was unlikely that he'd be able to pull that off with Brian's setup there. But I still think it's true what I said, whether he was planning on racing to the top or not, that exploring was not the ideal option for him. I couldn't even name what he'd really want to flip. He ends up even running away from this guy, going to somewhere else and grabbing a gem. At least he'll be able to defeat this guy. 2 coins and a tablet there is really nice. He'll prevent someone else from going there. But looks like Andy, who has a lot of coins, might be able to go fight Wukong here and make those 4 coins turn into 5 points. I think that's a really, really great opportunity for him with his extra assistant sitting around, or not assistant, employee, archaeologist sitting around ready to go. I like that Andy right now is rocking 2 different discard piles. Fun times. My default assumption is that this is where Andy wants to go. He's just points hoovering at this stage, collecting stuff here and there. He's going to go up the track, and ideally he gets up to where, where he needs to go next turn, but he's in no big rush. He gets to go first next turn. He'll move on to an empty monster in play or maybe explore the last site. So he wants to make sure that he's got compasses available for him to do that next turn, but he's going to just by advancing on the track and running his Silver Beardsman, the guy who runs the boat. Crack of an airdrop here. It's going to scoop up a tent. Binoculars flips out. Tent's pretty good. It's not hyper dreamy. And if Andrew is unable to defeat this monster, I'm going to have made a case for macheteing for those 2 compasses. I do think defeating the monsters here are just enough value and points that players really should be prioritizing those as actions and options along the way here. But he probably has another way to get himself some compasses. Brian's looking full on defeated at this stage as he moves into the top here with his book all the way at the bottom. By the way, I don't think that this is horrible. Like, being lopsided like this is fine. You have to miss out on something somewhere. You have to make some choices somewhere. And he draws a card. Probably it's a fear. I hope he's got a way of using that fear. And being the first there, it's a big point swing. I mean, it doesn't look like a big point swing, but in games that tend to be tighter, which one kind of feels like it's going to be pretty close, I think that it can really matter here. I'm going to need to figure out when I get to the end here if I'm going to pause and see if I can figure out from the video what the scores are, because I know what the end result is. You might know already as well if you're watching this, but I don't know what the scores are. And this game is definitely looking interesting enough that I think that the scores are probably going to be on the tighter side. what did I see from Henry? Henry advanced his book up, and he did it in such a way that left him with an arrowhead so that he can defeat this monster. Yeah, basically his turn is sort of clear from here. And I don't know if that card in his hand is a fear card. If it is, great. He'll use the Exiler to throw it away. And unfortunately, he didn't find a way most of the game to use use his fear for doing shenanigans. So like the coconut flask that Andy bought after Henry, I think that if Henry had bought that instead and discarded a fear card from his hand, if he has a fear card in his hand, is better than doing the explore that he did, for instance. Andy says, you know what? I don't really care about defeating Wukong, even though it's a freebie, basically. I am going to actually head out and explore the very last site. Exploring is now completely done for the game. If anybody's going to get some freebie monster defeats, it's going to be scooping up monsters that are left over at the end. And one of the ones that's there is the guy on the crash site there. Not the dreamiest location to go to, but I think well worth it if you're looking for a monster to fight. Brian's going to bounce off the board here with Ocarina. So it is coming back to make its play, which is nice and good for him. He set that up early in the game, and I think is fair for that to happen. We'll cash in here with our jeweler, advance up the track and scoop up a whole bunch of compasses, giving some flexibility here. If Henry's able to buy the Runes of the Dead, then he could use the Exiler to blow up the fear there if he doesn't have one in hand. And was that a purchase from Andy? Did he buy the binoculars? I think so. Andrew flips into a car. This is a really big deal for him. I think that I don't love the binoculars purchase on the last turn for Andy. I mean, he'll definitely draw into it, but 4 coins for a point, it's going to give him some positive resources, but that's not the dreamiest choice at the end. Brian here scooping up Torch. I think that's great. 2 coins, 2 points at this stage, and, might even end up being a 3rd point if he uses it and is able to exile something along the way there. Henry debating his turn. Did he spend his coins down? He sure did. He spent too many coins and he can't defeat the tanker. That's a pretty painful, I guess I'm going to call it a mistake. Yeah, I wouldn't have advanced the book. Because you can just advance it next turn. It doesn't have to advance it now. That definitely hurts. Yeah, if his last card there is not... He wants to defeat that guy. It's pretty important. We're going to get a compass here. He does have a fear card in hand, so that's 4 compasses. He just needs 1 coin. He can do this really in any way, so he's debating whether he does it with the Trader Scales or whether he does it with the Runes of the Dead, but he realizes that if he does it with the Trader Scales, he has this issue of an upgrade, and he doesn't want to upgrade the arrowhead. He wants the arrowhead. So he's going to do the upgrade. He's going to get himself a bunch of coins, but now he's going to have to use the idol to upgrade anyway. I think Runes of the Dead would have probably served him a little bit better there. He's going to be able to find a way to use those compasses or those tablets along the way. And we flip a guiding skull up top here, which if anybody had a lot of compasses for, they'd be pretty excited about. Andy will rip the donkey, drawing into pretty much the rest of his deck. Now I understand. He knew that he needed to put 1 more card in his deck because he hadn't played donkey yet, and he draws in the binoculars immediately. I take back what I said before about not liking the binoculars pickup. I think it makes a whole lot more sense here, knowing that's the case, and now I understand why he also did not defeat the Wukong, having managed his deck in that way. That makes a lot of sense. Is this a tent to scoop up some resources? But Andrew will pay 2 compasses to do the top action rather than doing his action in play. I think that's fine. It's not generally... I usually use the tent for using a mid-row thing, but actually, like, Andrew does not want the coin. So if he's willing to trade the 2 compasses for it, I think that works totally okay. He can then advance his book up, get the compasses that he needs to defeat the tiger that he's on, and move on. That, I think, works out very, very well for him. Brian, I might have missed his line on his turn. My guess is that he sent a guy out somewhere. Yeah, I think he sent his guy into the middle row there and got himself a compass and an arrowhead. This might be for just diversity or advancing purposes. And we're going to see the monster defeat here. It does cost him an idol there. So I stand by my Runes of the Dead criticism. I think that that would have been the better way of doing that. Somehow we picked up I think that was a use of the binoculars to get a fear tablet gem. We're at the stage where, you know, getting those resources is indeed more valuable than anything else. Andrew advanced to get the 3 compasses that he needs. Brian takes a step back as he's done. Henry takes a step back as he's done. And then we're left down to the people that have a lot of coins. And Andy's going to be playing for a while still. He's got a full grip. Looks like we have a tablet for basically turn a tablet into an arrowhead using the inscribed rune blade, advancing up there and getting his last gold. We're going to see Andrew defeat the tiger. Back to Andy. Andy does indeed have a gem, so I think we'll see another move there. He needs to find a way to defeat this snake that he has in front of him. Again, I can't see his resources, but I have to imagine that he's got an arrowhead lined up somehow, even if he has to use the idol to do it. Here's a coin and a gem to do that. Looks like that was a trowel play from Andrew, making use of that last gem there as well. And Andrew might be a little bit jammed up in terms of resources at this stage, though he has an idol available to him if he does want to keep advancing. I think he can save it for next turn. I don't think he's necessarily in a huge hurry. He can use his prospector to buy something, but ideally he'd want to be buying like army knife here, I guess, and that's not the most thrilling. But clearing out that row is a big challenge when you're playing prospector. You want those items to continue flipping, and as the game goes on, fewer and fewer come out. And he does still have his boat assistant, so that's a coin and a compass. And looks like he used the lantern there, sure. So that's going to give him the resources between the boatsman and the arrowhead there to scoop up the snake. Yep. And I think pretty quickly we're going to see the end of the round here. There we have it. And he's looking pretty happy there. I'm not surprised. I think he's in really good shape here. Track movement wise, you know, Brian has the big advantage of being at the 23. Andy, though, I think is really good in terms of monster defeats. I think Andrew's got 2. I think Henry's got 3. I think that Brian has 3 or 4, 2, 3, 3, 6. And I think Andy has 2 or 3 as well. I guess it would be really helpful if I could see the exact numbers. I'm kind of just making stuff up now, and it does make a difference. I wouldn't be surprised if Andy's very first move this turn is to go to where that spider is, because if he's the only one that can use his book killing a monster benefit to defeat that spider, it's really powerful. That being said, he is going to go to a top site using his double airplane to get just a bunch of resources. He does need to advance on the track, so that's not a terrible choice, but I do think that it's important. Andrew here, very excited to grab the Wukong, which he can easily defeat either by himself or moving the book up. So he's got some options in terms of how he's going to defeat that monster. For some reason, I totally missed that there are 2 monsters in play rather than the 1, which is pretty impressive on my part. I think, I'm going to keep saying it, but I think that there is some value. Is that an ocarina or not? There's a lot of fear cards in hand there. Is that an ocarina? I can't tell. Brian, if he does go to that site, needs to advance his book all the way up the track, which it's not clear if he's going to have the resources to be able to do that. So he doesn't necessarily have I need to rush the monster in the same way that everyone else does. That being said, he can just manually defeat it. It's worth 6 points, 5 + 1 for the exile itself. And so just taking 2 compasses off that site, it's only slightly worse than your other sites, and it gives you permission to defeat this monster here. If he has an ocarina in hand, maybe that changes the value of it a little bit, because discarding a card is really tough when you have ocarina. If he doesn't have ocarina, what is that friggin' blue card? Going up top and drawing a card. As I said before, I think this is maybe the best top site that's available in this game. Looks like he drew himself into a compass. There's a couple kind of exciting artifacts in play. The cheap, convert your compasses into gems or tablets, which I think should be some pretty quick pickups from people. There's also Runes of the Dead and Guiding Skull, which are really exciting freebies if you advance your book up to that second to last spot on the track there. Henry grabbing the spot that I think is a very good spot for him to grab. But again, we've left this spider around the whole table, so all these players are evaluating that monster kill a little bit less highly than I am. Maybe I'm going too crazy on it. Maybe you need to make sure that your resources get to the places where you want to be. Andy says, I want to know what I'm going to draw into. So he advances his magnifying glass to figure out what exactly his plan is going to be going forward. And Andrew will finally scoop up that remaining spider, which is going to work out really well for him because he almost certainly has the resources to get his book up to where it needs to go. Can't fully tell, but he is trying to defeat 2 monsters. Even if he does it manually, I think it's totally worthwhile. So I like that play from Andrew quite a bit. Andrew is working with kind of limited compass resources, though, because he's already moved his book up to the get 3 compasses spot. So that's something that he's going to have to be wary about as he's advancing up the track here. But he's already got the resources to advance both his magnifying glass and his book up. And then he needs to find some ways across his idol and any of the things that he buys to get them the rest of the way. So I think that converting, maybe if he's got a compass in hand, converting those 2 compasses into 2 tablets is going to go a long way there, because he needs 2 tablets to advance both of them to the top row, and he needs 2 tablets if he wants to go up the right side of the track there. If not, using those 2 compasses to pick up a gem with the cursed idol is also completely legit. So grabbing those resources, I think, is going to go a long way. If he's eyeballing the Guiding Skull, though, he might just need to move up the track. Brian's really slow rolling here. To me, this kind of says that he's really not sure what he wants to do. By removing that fear now, he doesn't really give himself a big advantage in timing or anything like that. He just kind of gets a tablet. Maybe he's burning time for something, but I'm not quite sure what it is. Now we see that the card that he has in hand is the Idol of Anu Narok, which means that he's not able to use his cards aggressively, which means that I do think he probably should have tried to manually defeat that monster last turn. He's going to have a really kind of weak last round here unless he finds a way to get enough resources to really get that book moving, which hopefully he can. He does still have an employee to put out, an assistant put out. He'll move up and finally golden something. Might be for a card draw. And praise for Ocarina, but it draws some coins instead with the gold pan. Henry advances and then is going to use compasses with the Guiding Skull to flip into the rainbow, 1 of each. Looks unhappy about that, but I'm not quite sure what he was hoping for. That does seem perfectly fine. Because he can finish advancing his book is not exciting, though. I guess he needed a gem. So he was kind of at a 50-50 because there's 1 gem site remaining. And that one. So yeah, it was a coin flip one way or the other, but if you're not very familiar with the game, you might not know how difficult it is to pull that up. Andy, even though he didn't get to grab one of the monsters in play, or didn't choose to grab one of the monsters in play, does manage to get 2 of the top sites, as everyone else seems to be kind of struggling with their hand, letting them go to places where they want to go. Andrew here will advance his book and get the value of all of these tablets, which is going to put him a little bit over tableted, actually. He's got 4 tablets available to him, And he's going to need to find a way to get himself an arrowhead and a gem. So he really should see if he can get at that serpent idol. Brian's going to make another move here. It looks like he actually had a little bit more in the tank than I maybe thought I gave him credit for. Now I see, why he was doing that torch, so he could move up the track, draw his cards, upgrade his guys, and make his plans from there. Henry says, you know what, I'm really, really good at destroying exiled things. Give me all the fear possible. And that's what I'm talking about, that exile are really kind of upgrading its power when you have those fear sites in game. They basically come with no downside and just the bonuses. And so it's showing its true top capacity here. A couple of resources from Andy. He'll scoop up 3 compasses for moving the book up to this site, which gives him a lot more flexibility. Again, we don't know what Andrew's hand is, but if he has that compass, I think that gem is really, really important for him at this stage. I guess that being said, when he defeats Wukong, he actually can turn some of these tablets into arrowheads, and maybe he can just do it that way. Now that I'm looking at it, maybe he just tries to find himself a couple of arrowheads, does it the Wukong way. No, he was listening to me. Let's get the gem. Ceremonial Rattle. I really like Ceremonial Rattle more than most people. I think if you have the discounter or the lady that uses 2 compasses, it's like just a really, really good points ratio. Watch here gets a couple coins. I think is probably just going to be used to move on the track. Looks like he's trying to get himself some compasses, give himself some options here. But actually, he is going to go ahead and travel. No, okay. He wants to get those tablets, which makes sense. I think it's been sitting around for a while. And we flip star charts. Brian's pretty upset about that one. Looks like he maybe was kind of like waiting to see what would happen. And this just flips a lot of options for Andy, who's going to get a freebie off the track here. So almost certainly that star charts is going to put Andy into solving any problems that he needs to solve before the end of the game. Henry here advancing into the second slot. I think this makes a lot of sense. Debates his bonus for a minute and then takes a compass. Not quite sure what he's going to do with that, but maybe it depends on what else he has in hand. Advance here, scoop up star charts, get all the resources that are needed. If he has any fear cards, he can discard them to gems. Again, we can't quite see what Andy's situation is, but he does indeed discard for gems and pick something else up. Looks like he's got himself some tablets. We know he just got himself a gem. So if he has an arrowhead and a coin, then he can go left side, right side, and he's good to go. Actually, he might not even advance the book. He might just go left side and then straight to the top. I think that would be entirely reasonable. Theodolite crack here from Andrew. Theodolite doing a lot of work for him this game. Exile. Brian did indeed advance and pick up a whole bunch of compasses. Henry buys the Guiding Stone. I guess this is interesting. It lets him buy stuff. Is that the right choice? I kind of wonder if Ceremonial Rattle might have been the more controlled choice there. Advancing on the track doesn't necessarily do a lot for him. Henry, I think, is just trying to get the 11 temple tile. And, it works. Actually, it works out kind of okay, but I think he might be a little bit over arrowheaded right now. So the reward is, was moderately likely to be arrowheads. This looks like it's an Idol of Anu Narak here. Rip some cards. Pathfinder Sandals isn't bad. He even has a tablet left available for use, so that worked out pretty nicely. Technically, I think you're not allowed to look at this card pile, but I'm not sure. Maybe that's just how it is on BGA, and so I've made up this rule. 2 points, it looks like, in the discard pile there for anybody looking to use the Ornate Hammer, which is my default assumption. Sometimes it's only ones, though. We're on Henry's turn here? Yeah, it looks like. Ah, okay. So Henry has the Pathfinder staff here. He needs more gems, I think. Or no, he can make gems, so he's got a gem. This is really awkward because he needs compasses, but not arrowheads. Looks like he doesn't know quite what he wants, so he draws a random card, which I think is going to backfire, and we see him put his face in his hands there, as he's not going to figure out a plan with all of these arrowheads. I think that was a desperation choice, but I think managing those resources a little bit differently. Andy, interestingly, here goes for a lot of coins. A pickup on Serpent's Gold here. It's not bad point-wise, right? Because it's functionally a point. It's 2 points minus the 1 for the fear that you get, and maybe he finds a way to destroy the fear somehow. And then you can use the coins to buy stuff, but it's not an exciting buying spot. Andrew here advances. Brian finally puts his last assistant out, getting the resources that he needs to kind of finish out the track here. And we see that he would have indeed been able to get his book to the top, even if he had placed, well, maybe not. If he'd placed there, he'd have to figure something out with, yeah, so maybe not necessarily. It is definitely questionable whether he could have gotten the correct resources to advance to the top. But I think I have faith. I have faith that he would have found a line. Advance for Andy here. Does Andrew have the resources to get third? He sure does. Andy is going to be stuck officially in last, getting to the top of the track, if that is what he's going for, which almost certainly it is, since he picked up a gem. And then we'll have to see if Andrew has the resources left to defeat all these monsters, because he's made a lot of moves. Oh yeah, he sure does. Because he's got the coins for the monkey, and he's got an idol. Really well managed in the last turn here. I think Andrew's kind of mid-game was a little bit fine, but his end game here was really quite strong. Oh, Henry here coming out with extra gas with an upgrade, it looks like. That works out decently for him. Andrew picks up the Ornate Hammer. Oh, this is clever. Throws the army knife in the discard pile and then is going to pick something worth a couple more points. That's a nice way to use some compasses at the end there. Kind of clears up the row, maybe makes buying some stuff. Here's a crappy journal to replace it. There's too many coins kind of available in play right now anyway. Brian does the full top Monty and is pretty much, I think, done for the game. We see Henry's really awkward resources coming back to haunt him here. As he's just going to be buying 2 temple things. Relatively sure that Henry is in last and Brian is in third. Andrew second and Andy. Basically, the seeding order, I think, is the winning order. Although between Andrew and Andy, it's quite interesting at this stage because Andrew's got cards in his deck. He's going to have 4 monsters defeated. And Andy, I think, is similar with the cards in the deck. But I think he still had a little bit of gas in the tank in order to maybe take some top temple stuff here. We're going to defeat Wukong. I think that's a full pass for Brian. We see Henry scoop up another 2-gem tile. And is going to pass with just a lot of resources in play. We see Andy organizing his stuff in what looks like a gem, a tablet, compass. Looks like he's going to maybe be able to buy an 11. Looks like he's pushing in for 2 tablets so that he can buy an 11 temple tile. Yep, there it is. You're short a coin, though. Yep. Four coin pickup here for Andrew. Kind of has to make the weird choice about does he buy the journal? Oh, he still has to do some advancing. My mistake. And he gets to destroy a fear immediately. Yeah, this was a monster last turn for Andrew. I think before this turn, I would have said he was in last place. But this last turn was really kind of well managed. He didn't need resources in the same way that other players did. And he, scooped up the 2 monsters that they all left behind. 2 coins for 1 point, entirely respectable at this stage. Ah, great. Looks like Andy can pick up a ceremonial rattle for 2 points. And Andrew will rip out an automobile for a card draw and a point there. And we'll flip a airplane, which I think looks like Andy will have just enough to buy. Works out really nicely for him. And Andrew will be perfectly happy to flip a chronometer and spend the 3 coins on that. It looks like a lot of really lucky off the top flips here. It's genuinely an interesting question about whether Henry should just not buy the journal and kind of crap up the deck. But with the players behind him having so many coins available, they can kind of break through, and getting 0 for yourself is not a way to win. All right, so I'm going to pause here. Give me just a quick second to find out what the scores are. Okay, so clearly I was stuck in an old heuristic of what the earlier rounds were, because Andrew does come out on top thanks to his efficient playing. I also think I just remembered incorrectly who advanced from this game. So maybe I didn't really know the outcomes of the game, and that kind of messed with my head a little bit. Should have trusted how good Andrew's last turn was here with the 4 monsters in total and the number of points in deck, and not being too terribly, not in a bad spot on the track. So he does win with 85 points. Andy had 77 points, Brian 75, and Henry 69. So largely, except for my stumble with calculating Andrew, matches kind of what the flow is that looked like it was for the course of the game. I think the thing that primarily worked out in Andrew's favor at the end here was being able to grab both of those monsters at the end. Now, that being said, he won by more than 5 points, so it's not just that. But, if you imagine you get another 2 or 3 points and he's minus 5 points there, yes, he has something else that he can do, but imagine if he's using those coins that killed the Wukong for, buying 1 or 2 points off the track. In fact, I jumped forward and backwards. I'm trying to remember what item was on the top at the end. I think it was like carrier pigeon or something like that. I think carrier pigeon is what we're looking at there. So not a whole bunch of stuff there. But a couple nice flips, a couple way to get some extra points at the end of the game, make a big difference. I think that generally people will look at this and say, oh, it's Prospector. Prospector is the reason that the Prospector wins this game. But I don't think that it's just that. I think there were other opportunities, other efficiencies that Andrew got, particularly at the end of the game where things got really cleaned up for him that worked out really nicely. The Prospector didn't do insane stuff in the middle of the game. Obviously, it does generate positive value. But he was a little bit behind the track, didn't get those bonuses along the way, and just kind of played efficiently throughout the course of the game. But he only had 2 monsters up until that end round there, and it's entirely plausible that he could have walked away with functionally 0 of them, actually. And that would have worked out, I think, quite differently in the end here. And so maybe just misevaluating what's important can go a long way here. Well, hope you enjoyed watching. And again, if you want to see this over with a more solid evaluation, you can check it out. You can see what I watch on YouTube. You can check it out at the WSBG website, where JC and Chris do a wonderful job with this game. Thanks for watching. Bye.